you've got to be very vigilant as a parent to not allow your child to be vulnerable.
Christ.
Being a parent and actually digging into who are you talking to and who is this person? I've caught my kids talking to people that they weren't supposed to be talking to, ended up being predators right in my own home. Of course.
Really?
Absolutely.
You have?
Oh, yes.
How long were you doing this for?
Well, at the Attorney General's office for right at 2 years. And then I went after that, I started nonprofits and went and taught law enforcement agencies. So I've been doing it for over 20. It's almost impossible to find your purpose because you're living in an emotional whirlwind of chaos, right? Every day, you might have a good day today, but then tomorrow you're unmotivated because this is on fire. You don't have enough money to pay this, or your child is having a problem with that, or whatever it is. And so we're all faced with adversity from every angle all the time. And until your life gets in balance, it's almost impossible to see your true purpose. So once we give our why, though, when you have your why, then you wake up every day motivated because you're doing something purposeful in your life.
I only recently discovered mine.
That's right. I tell my kids that all the time. I'm 54 years old, and I tell them, don't feel so much pressure to find your purpose at 17.
On today's episode of the Engaging Marketeer, I'm going to have to give a bit of a trigger warning because I am speaking with a guy called Christopher Duff, and Christopher, there's no easy way to say this, Christopher would pose online as a child to catch sexual predators. So I'm going to be speaking to Christopher about his time working within law enforcement, where he would create profiles of children to catch predators who were trying to get children to do the things that predators get children to do. I'm going to be talking with him about some stories he's got, about some people he put away, and how he managed to do what he did and still sleep at night with all the horrors and evils of the world that he discovered, but he also helped get off the streets. So again, this is going to be a bit of a trigger warning. There are some stuff in here that, particularly for parents, that you may not want to hear, but quite frankly, you absolutely should. So Chris, you and I have a similar interest, I believe, in, I don't know, the dark part of the web, the dark part of cyber. You've seen my TEDx talk on exposing a cyberbully, and you yourself did this, not just an amateur like me, you did this professionally, you did this for a career, and you probably uncovered a number of very seedy people doing this. What got you into that role in the first place?
Yeah, that's a good question. My law enforcement career really started. I volunteered to be a reserve uniform patrol deputy, and I patrolled the streets of where I lived. I was newly married, and we had a child on the way. Well, that was when I started with the Attorney General's office. But as I did that for about 5 years, I became best friends with who is still to this day my best friend. He was an assistant attorney general for the state of Louisiana. And he was building one of the first high-tech crime units in the country. And he's also an attorney. And he said, look, man, I need your help. I need your help build this thing. So I went in and started working with him in a reserve capacity. And the very first night that I got online posing as a child, built my first online undercover profile. Of course, before that went through some training, but the very first night that I actually went live online posing as a child, I posed as a 13-year-old female in the beginning. It was almost immediate that literally in the first 30 minutes, I had predators contacting me, trying to get me to send them images, graphic images, them exposing themselves to me. So it was just like one of those paradigm shifts that we go through in life, where just 1 minute I saw life in one way, and another minute it just exposed this whole new world to me. And I think the biggest thing that really hit me was how alone our children are in cyberspace, and what they face on a daily basis. So from that moment on, I was like, I felt like they're also alone, and that there was no one protecting them. So it became kind of an obsession to get online and protect our youth.
How prepared were you for what you saw?
I wasn't, as far as mentally, I don't know if anybody can really be prepared. Just being completely honest, prepared as far as trading and all, I was good. I was prepared, but as far as what I saw, it completely shocked me. I wasn't, I had been warned ahead of time, right? But that's kind of like any massive experience like that in life. You're never truly prepared for
Mm.
something like that. It hits you square in the face, right? So yeah, it just again, it was this paradigm shifting part of life that from then till this day, and this was back in 2005, 2006, when all of this was really a burgeoning, the internet and what our
Mm.
kids were, really. But here's well, I'm sure we'll get to this part, but it's worse today.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's just I wasn't prepared to answer your question.
So back then, 2005, 2006, Facebook was just starting to emerge. Twitter didn't exist.
Right.
It would have been MySpace was relatively big back then. But what platforms were you using to create these profiles?
Well, we would create them in chat rooms where where you could communicate one on one with other people, and we used a myriad of different chat rooms. To be honest with you, it's been that long ago. I don't remember the specific chat rooms because they've changed so much. They change
Yeah.
year to year anyway. But we were on many different platforms. And again, we'll get to warnings to some of the listeners, any parents out there. But anywhere, here's just the blanket statement: anywhere that you can communicate with someone that's not in your immediate world, a stranger or someone posing as someone you might think they are. So when I would give presentations, which I've given to thousands of students and parents over the years, if your child can communicate with a stranger, whether it be in a game, because we posed online in games,
Mm.
on social, and we'd have undercover profiles in all the different social media platforms, whichever one, like you mentioned, were popular at the time. And as the years go by, the same thing. But anywhere you can communicate with a stranger or with another person that's not in your home, predators are there.
Wow. And I was going to say, how many children do you think you've saved from having something worse happen to them because of what you've done?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Like I told you, my best friend and I literally were discussing that the other day, and I don't even know that it's quantifiable because the ones we say, I know that in my first year I arrested over 80 internet predators. I was literally serving search warrants 2 to 3 a week. I mean that I was.
Wow.
They
That's
were telling me
fast.
they were telling me to slow down, but I could. Again, I was obsessed with putting these people in jail, but. So the reality is that, but that's a drop in the bucket compared to the amount of people that the kids we might have saved by doing the presentations and opening their eyes. The
Mm.
thing that's really blown my mind with that was when I would give the presentations, I would show them my undercover profiles. I would show them what we were exposed to within reason, right? It can't be too graphic.
Of
We would have a
course.
couple of different presentations. I would teach one to the kids when we would go to the schools, high schools, and so forth. And we wouldn't be as graphic, but we would be just enough to hit them hard and let them understand what we know what they're facing. And then we would do a little bit further, a little bit more graphic with parents because they're adults, and so that they could see. And the what was really transformative for me, I would think, oh, the kids aren't going to listen to us. They're young adult, they're young teenagers, they're not going to pay attention. As with the presentation, as I would go through the presentation, about an hour-long presentation, you could see their eyes were this big around. They were totally engaged. And even after the presentation, I would have a line of students waiting to ask me questions and talk to me. And what that told me was that our youth really doesn't have a conduit to talk to someone about these issues, right? About whether it's cyberbullying, whether it's online solicitation, whether any of this sextortion, which is a major problem in our world. They really don't have anyone to talk to. One of the biggest problems is this generation gap that we have between us as parents, our generation, and their technology generation. they're raised with a phone in their hand. They're raised learning all of this. This is where they communicate. It's where they socialize. It's where they do all of their stuff. So parents out there, for the most part, are gravely undereducated as far as how the world works online. And our children know that. I would ask the kids in the presentation, raise your hands if you know more about the internet than your parents. And almost every single hand goes in the air.
Of course, yeah.
Right. So go back and answer your question full circle. How many of those kids that would come up to me and say, I'm going home and delete my accounts and I'm changing everything. I'm no longer going to try to get as many friends as I can get. I'm going to set it to private. I'm going to renew all of my stuff. So how many did we save doing that? It is a large number.
And when you were doing this, how big was the department you were in? How many people like you were there doing it? It's very much like it is today because of funding. But when I was doing it, our high tech crime unit probably had a total of, and now I'm going to include forensic investigators as well as investigators in the field that are actually doing proactive and reactive undercover in any of the investigations. I'd probably say 8. Wow,
maybe something like that. And so you got half of that is your forensic team that basically does all of the computers and phones and all of the investigations into that, the forensics, and then probably 2 or 3 agents in the field and then their supervisors, which would be 1 or 2. So, and to be honest with you, again, agencies today, the funding, the law enforcement's already stretched thin. Every agency across the country is stretched thin. So, what we need to have is a high-tech investigator in every sheriff's department, police department. Not, it doesn't need to be just the Department of Justice for each state. Those are great, but every department, we need to have funding where the local departments can have someone that deals with these types of crimes as well.
And those 8 people, that was for the whole state?
Whole state.
Jesus. I'm curious of the kind of people that you uncovered, the kind of people that you got arrested. What sort of age ranges were they in terms of youngest to oldest?
Every walk of life. You're talking about, I've arrested every occupation, every walk of life, youth ministers, police, firemen, teachers, pastors, educate. I mean, you name it. From every walk of life, there was, and again, we didn't discriminate as far as who. If you're a child predator, you're going to jail. That's just the way we looked at it. And again, you have to remember when we say 8 people, back then this is brand new. We had to lobby to get that many people. Back then, it was just starting to become where people were realizing this was a problem. The majority of the world didn't even know this was a problem. It was a heaven for predators because they knew they were untouchable online. But as far as the predators that we saw, it just really it was the age ranges. It was the gambit from young adults all the way to 60, 70 years old.
Wow. And I've got to ask about crimes as well. Presumably, these people weren't just messaging who they thought was a child. I imagine when the investigation happened and you found who they were, there was other things that they had done in many cases.
Oh, absolutely. Again, the ultimate fear would be, and again, it drove us to. I mean, we always had the potential of kicking in a door when we would serve a search warrant and having a child, tied up in the back room, right? I mean, that was always a possibility that because you're dealing with child predators. So the majority of these people are pedophiles. They're actively seeking children. So we arrested numerous of them that were either committing they were abusing a child in real life, or they had in the past. They were a repeat offender that we caught up with. As a matter of fact, I can just remember one case in particular where the person we arrested was actively grooming and taking pictures and what we believed was planning to to abduct a child in the place where they live. They lived in a mobile home park, and when we arrested him, he was a former child pornography. He had been arrested for child pornography in the past, and he had just been released about 6 months prior to this. But he had images and photographs of a child that lived there. He had been sneaking around taking pictures of through the window. He had a rape kit. He had a Ziploc bag full of the child. He had already gotten things from the child, wow. Duct tape, things like that. So in those situations, it was very rewarding because I knew for a fact we had saved a child, because we totally believed that was in the near future, that was going to take place, and who knows the nightmares that would have, what he would have done. But we were able to get him in custody and put him in jail. So when you're dealing with these investigations, as far as the crimes, we worked closely with the Internet Crimes Against Children, the IAAC, which is in the United States. That's where they house the database of all known child pornography, and we can see when those are traded anywhere in the country, which are being traded at all the time, 24/7. And so those people are, for the most part, if they're trading child pornography, they're pedophiles. So whether they've offended in the past or whether they're going to offend in the future, that's the people we were dealing with.
Wow. And in terms of actually trapping these people, what was the process you had to go through, and legally, what did you have to be careful about doing?
Yeah, so during that time, and that's one of the biggest roles that we played, was going around and training law enforcement that we're going to do these types of investigations to make sure that they did them correctly. I don't know if you remember, and I'm sure some of the listeners will remember the show To Catch a Predator, that was really, really big on television, where they showed those kinds of things. So we wanted to make sure that the investigations were done correctly, where they weren't trapped, right? Where they weren't entrapped, where you didn't lead them on. You didn't have to. That's the reality of it. I mean, when I posed online as a child, I posed online as a child. I didn't talk sexually. I didn't put photographs of something that was provocative or anything like that. I was a regular 13-year-old child that went to a local school. And when they would talk with me, of course, all the chats and all of the things that were recorded, I knew, and this is what I would teach to other law enforcement agencies, I knew that was going to be in court on a big screen at some point, and that was going to be gone through line by line by a defense attorney, and by going to try to be picked apart as far as, did you lead this person on? Did at any time would this person have believed that maybe this wasn't a child? So it was very important that none of those kinds of things were done. It was strictly, especially, and I would even try to talk the people out of it when they would start talking sexually. I'm too young. I don't talk about things like this. I could get in trouble. Those kinds of things. So very innocent. Very again, what I felt like a 13-year-old, how they would talk, how they would act, even so much as kicking them off. I got to go. This is getting too graphic for me, and just kick them off. Well, they would hit me right back. Come on, I'm sorry, come on back, kind of thing. So really tried to run the investigations very, very innocent as possible. And the more innocent you were, the worse they got. I mean, that's just the truth. So you didn't have to do anything that would jeopardize the case. And that, again, I thought it was very imperative to teach law enforcement that, so that when if they did start doing investigations like they saw on television or whatever, that they did them correctly, that wouldn't allow a perpetrator like any of these monsters to get away with it, to go in court and have it kicked out because the investigation was too provocative, or it was too leading, or it was too much that could draw somebody in that actually wasn't a predator. And that's the other thing, which is another great point. I never wanted to arrest somebody that just kind of got carried away and they really weren't a pedophile or a predator. I really had no interest in that. And if I felt like in an investigation that that was happening, I would really try to make this person go away. Again, trying to tell them, you shouldn't be talking to me. I'm way too young. I was truly after predators that were preying on kids. I wasn't trying to get a normal person that would be just got carried away from one text to another or something, and they said something they shouldn't have said. I had no interest in that. I really want, and in that case, I really want to scare them so that they would never do this again, and so that they wouldn't get drawn into a life or into a crime that they really had no business committing.
So in some of those cases, did you actually say who you were to scare
I wouldn't
them
say
off?
I never said who I was, but but again, I would I could tell whenever this person was flirting with the line. They would even they might even say things like, I probably shouldn't be talking to you, and I could tell that they were having this mental battle with, I'm about to do something I shouldn't do. And in some cases I would do everything I could do to make them go away. And if they just kept coming, then I would have to do my job. And because if they're doing that to me, if they're going to groom me, even no matter how much I try to push them away, then they're going to do it to another child, somebody's daughter, somebody's son. And so then it's like, okay, at this point you need to go to jail and you need to learn a really hard lesson so that you stop this and that we don't have any victims in your future.
And did you ever get any situations where you had someone you thought, this person is clearly a predator, this person needs to go to jail, but they got away with it
all the time? I mean, again, you today, even right now, I mean, there are times when they would just pop on and talk to me. Back then, the way the terminology went is you would do ASL, age, sex, and location, and you would tell them your age, whether you're male or female, and where you lived. And I mean, literally, I had many where you would go through that 13 female, and I would tell them where I was, and they would just pop up their webcam masturbating in front of me. So, yeah, does that answer your question? Right. So, I mean, that person needs to go to jail. Then it would become my life mission to find him. You know what I mean? So, yes.
And some got away is where I was getting at. Is there any frustrations you had where you possibly went to court and they were let off and it frustrated you?
Very rarely, because the great thing about technology is everything's recorded. So there was a record of everything, and we would fire off search warrants to get where they're coming from, where their IP address is, and know exactly where they were. We would put them at the keyboard or at the phone. Very rarely could they talk their way out of it or find some kind of technicality. But I will tell you this. This is another interesting topic. When I first started, there were no laws that on the books that were actually dedicated to these things. I'm sure you saw that when you researched cyberbullying for your TED Talk and so forth, and when you were dealing with your child. So what we had to do on the first year, I mean, literally first months that we started doing this, we realized that was the biggest problem. The first several arrests that we made, we had to charge them with things like indecent behavior and stalking or something. We really couldn't. There wasn't any laws, so we worked with the legislator, and we got one of the first internet predator statutes in the country passed through and made into law. Online sexual. I'm trying to remember the exact name of it. Online solicitation of a juvenile for sexual purposes. What the law ended up being titled. And they got minimum mandatory 2 years for any online solicitation of a juvenile for sexual purposes. So we literally I went to the legislature with a couple of other people and presented to the legislature to get it passed, tell them how bad of a problem it was. We don't have a law to arrest these people with, and they're preying on your children. We need something. We need a heavy hammer so that we can put these people away and make sure and try to stop them from doing it. Once we got that passed, then it was a lot better. Where as far as there were no and again in the beginning, the defense attorneys would always like to argue, well, you're not a child, so there was no true victim. Well, that got all stipulated in the laws and all of that it doesn't matter. That's who they believed they were speaking to. They believed they were preying on a child and so forth.
And how long were you doing this for?
Well, at the Attorney General's office for right at 2 years. And then I went after that, I started nonprofits and went and taught law enforcement agencies. So I've been doing it for over 20, but I would still help with.
I was wondering how you'd actually shut off. How would you tune this out at the end of the day? Because this is something that's very difficult to get off your mind.
Yeah, it's a great question. As a matter of fact, it was then. I'm not 100% now, but like the agency, like the FBI, for example, I think the name of their department that handles these types of cases is called Innocent Images or something like that, and they only allow them to work in this for 2 years because
Right.
the mental toll it takes on you is, it's horrible. I mean, it's horrible to you can't do it for too long before it starts really messing you up, because again, the anger is on, if you just really just can't handle too much of it, but you can't turn it off because those things stick with you forever. I mean, again, it's almost like PTSD, where you just have it's traumatic to see what some of these children and babies. I mean, when you get into child pornography, that's a whole nother world that is just awful. I mean, it's no human should have to see that, right? It's just the worst of the worst, the most evil on planet Earth. I would also say this in my presentations: no matter what your belief system is, I'm a Christian, and I have a belief system, but I would say to people, because when I did presentations, I'm speaking to all walks of life. So it doesn't matter to me what your belief system is, but one thing we can all agree upon, and if you don't agree with this, then you're sticking your head in the sand. There is evil in this world. That's just a reality. And if you don't believe it, I've seen it firsthand. I've seen it up close and personal. And if you don't believe that people that prey on babies and children and abuse them and seek out hunt them and so forth, if you don't believe that's evil, then you're probably evil yourself. I mean, I don't see how any human being could not consider that an evil thing. So that's what, if you're against people that fight for that, then I think you have to take a hard look at who you are, because it's something that when I did get out of it, I had to do. That's why I went to a nonprofit. I started a nonprofit called Innocent Eyes that actually went around and taught all of this stuff to try to wake the people up. Well, most parents have no idea that their kids are facing this kind of thing. They don't think that, well, my kid's just they're dealing with their friends and so forth. Yes. And I know, as well, I saw in your TED Talk where, they put up fake profiles. Yeah. And again, another thing we could talk about that I really want to drive home to people that are listening. So I would always give this scenario. When you think about a predator online or cyberbullying or anything like that, you think that and I would tell this to the kids. I would say, you think that the bad actors in this, you would know who they are. Oh, that I would know right away. It's going to be a criminal, an adult. I would never talk to some 60-year-old guy. That's all true. That's common logical sense. But what they do is, predators, for example, they will build fake profiles of the opposite sex of what they're hunting, right? So if they're wanting images of little boys, let's say, they're wanting to build a relationship with a little boy, or get a child to take pictures of themselves, graphic images and videos and things. Well, what they're going to do is they're going to pose as young girls. So what they do is they'll go online to build a library of young girl things, images, profiles, and so forth, so that they can use that to prey on young boys. And the whole process would be that they have these fake profiles, and it'd be someone that lives in a town over from where you are, someone that's not, like, maybe doesn't go to that child's school, but a school they know the name of, right? So that they would trust it. And it would be some cute girl or boy from that school and say, hey, a friend of mine, and they find them on their social with their friends' names and so forth. A friend of mine told me about you. I just wanted to hit you up and give you, DM you and whatever. And they go, oh, okay, yeah, I know them. And then they would immediately start trusting. And they go, oh, wow, he's cute, or wow, she's cute. And so then that kind of starts the talking back and forth. And they just continue to groom. And they would send a picture. Hey, I'm going to the beach this weekend. How about I send you a picture of me in my bathing suit? They go, I don't know. Okay. And so then they send this picture of some cute boy or cute girl in their bathing suit. And then they would say, hey, now I sent you one of mine. I want to see your bathing suit. And it starts that innocent, where they can just start getting them one step at a time, trusting and getting a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And before you know it, some of the victims would start, they'd get them to talk them into sending them a nude picture or a picture of them in a graphic situation. And this is the way sextortion happens. So then once they get a couple of compromising images or video where they would do, FaceTime, and they would get whatever, they'd record it. And then they would say, okay, at some point they would go ahead and say, the gig is up. I'm not this boy or girl from the town over. I am so-and-so, and I have all these images of you. And from now on, you're going to do exactly what I tell you to do. Or I'm going to release these images or these videos to your parents. I'm going to send them to your school. I'm going to put them, your life's going to be over. Imagine the mind of a 14-year-old child, 13-year-old child, a 15-year-old child. They're not equipped to handle this. And so they go, okay, oh my God, I got to do whatever this person says now. And they're in complete panic mode. There's been suicides over this. There's been, you name they feel like they're in prison, and then all they can do is do whatever they're told to do by this monster. So the reason I tell that story is I want the youth listening or the parents that are listening to understand this is how it happens. The predator doesn't come online and say, hey, I'm a predator. See some pictures. It doesn't happen like that. It happens where they groom them over time, and they believe they're talking to somebody else. And our youth are so hungry to be connected and so hungry to have a relationship with somebody. They're so hungry to be accepted. And that's what a predator does. They prey on that. They know that they're immature. They know that they can prey on this, and that's who they look for. They look for those minds that are maybe not as confident as the other one that would automatically say, no, I don't know you. Right. So parents need to understand that they prey on those vulnerabilities.
If it wasn't so evil, it's actually very clever how they do it. It's clearly a structured plan that has been honed and perfected and then shared and passed on, and people are using it. It's very psychological, and it's very effective.
Yes. It's no question. This is the other thing that I would explain. In presentations, I would say, where does a hunter go to hunt the game it's wanting to hunt? Where does a fisherman go to catch the fish that it wants to catch? And when they do that, do you think a hunter just gets a gun and walks off in the woods and hopes something walks by? No, they do their scouting. They put out the bait. They get a stand and they put it up, and they look at the area. They do all the planning. They're a hunter, right? Predators spend their entire time. This is what they do. And so they're very clever. They're human beings with brains like me and you. They plan this out and figure out the best way they can to get their objective.
When you started doing this, you mentioned it was online chat rooms. So there was barely, Facebook had only just started. It was different back then. Now there's a lot of social media. You've got smartphones with 24/7 access to the internet now, so kids don't have to be visibly sitting in front of a computer on a dial-up or a broadband to get it. They can get it anywhere. They can get it sat in the bathroom. They can get it on the bus. Wherever they are, it's there. Now, with these social media platforms like Facebook, like Twitter, like Instagram, like TikTok, there are people in charge of these things. There are safety protocols. Do you think they're doing anywhere near enough to help keep people safe?
No, and I'm glad you asked that question. There's so many things I want to say about just that sentence you just said. So that's 100% accurate. And our kids have access to the most graphic and evil things in the world in the palm of their hand. And it's absolutely normal that all of our children, mine included, have phones, right? And that access to anywhere in the world and a camera, right? A really high resolution video and photographic camera on their phone. So I'll try not to make it a long answer and answer what the specific question is. Are they doing enough? Well, here's kind of what that plays into, because I still stay in close contact with my friends that actually still doing this for a living, and they're high up in organizations that deal with this. And one of the things they're seeing now is, so let's rewind back to those days, back to the early 2000s. What you have to do in an investigation like this, and you've probably found this out with the cyberbullying. So whenever the process of when you get a person that you know is a predator online, they're chatting with you, you're a child, and you got to figure out who they are, right? So you got to find them. You got to go. So the process of that is now I've got to get search warrants done. I've got to draft up all this. I got to get a judge to sign it. I've got to send it off to whether it's a social media company or whether it's the internet the internet companies, where we can find out the IP address where this is coming from and any information we can get on the person that's tied to this account. So after all that stuff, you get the search warrant and you actually go and start researching the people that live at that residence or that business or that own that phone or whatever the case. Well, the reason I tell you that is because the search warrants, what you have to do is you send off these things to the social media company. Well, what they've started doing now is they put in an effort, again, I say an effort with quotation marks, in an effort to try to be more proactive in stopping this. What they do now is they've just set up an algorithm or what, and again, I could be totally off base on saying algorithm, but something like that, where when anything graphic comes across that social media, they just fire off reports to IAAC, to Internet Crimes Against Children, and then those get disseminated to all the agencies that would. So in other words, if they get a report from Snapchat that says a graphic image of a child was in our thing, that gets sent to IAAC, and then they would, if that came from an IP address in a certain state, whether it doesn't matter where it is, then IAAC would disseminate that to that state, and those agents would then have to take that report and go, okay, we got to follow up on this. There was a graphic image on Snapchat. Now, I want you to imagine if Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever, if now they have a protocol where, okay, we're just not really even going to deal with these search warrants because that takes too much of our time. We're just going to send every single thing that comes across our platform that could possibly be misconstrued as a law being broken with children, where children are concerned, and we're going to send everything we got to IAAC and have them disseminate that to the agency. So remember a minute ago I said they're overwhelmed. Most of the agencies are only dealing with probably 20% of the cases that they get, because those have to be triaged to the worst case, right? So they're going to deal with the 20% that are the absolute worst situation, and then they have no choice, right? These are our worst offenders. Well, what happens to the other 80%? Because simply, and I guarantee you all agencies would agree with me, they're absolutely understaffed. I mean, if they would be happy to have the public say, okay, we're willing to pay our tax dollars. I want you to double that unit in my state. I want you to, whatever it takes to protect our kids. But that's where we find ourselves now, is that there's so many complaints, and all the social media companies are saying, okay, we're just going to send you everything that's questionable or everything that, well, that's great. Thank you. But it's overwhelmed the agencies across the country to where all they can really handle is the absolute worst of the worst.
Can they even sift through it manually to find the worst of the worst? Because I know from Facebook in particular, for example, that they will ban images if a personal trainer, if a gym instructor puts an image of themselves on Facebook in, say, a sports bra. Facebook will automatically pick up, well, there's too much flesh tone on that, that's blocked. I put a photograph of myself up as a kid on my profile, and it blocked that because it thought it was a dodgy picture and it was me as a child. If it's blocking stuff automatically, much of which is absolutely fine, surely it's sending so many false positives that it's wasting valuable resources in having to sift through this to find the genuine problems.
Sure, and a full disclosure, I'm not going to act like I'm an expert where that's concerned, because I'm really not. I don't have the expertise to know exactly what their protocols deal with and how. So I and it's just like most things in life. I guarantee some of those protocols are great, and I'm glad at least we're talking about it, and at least they're doing something, right? At least they're proactively doing that. But the thing that really has to be understood is that predators find their ways around whatever they got to find. They don't really care about posting images on Facebook. I mean, what they're wanting to do is find a way to get to talk to kids and so that they can groom and convince them to do what they want to do. So the ultimate message about it all is and that's why I started doing the presentations, and that's why that's the best way we could stop more predators and more children being abused or affected by all of this, is if we can teach the parents and the kids how not to become victims in the first place. So if anything, I hope that parents that are listening to this understand that if your child is talking to anybody outside of your world, whether it's somebody at school, whatever, because my children, whenever as they've come up, they go, well, Dad, it's just somebody from school. And I go, okay, that's great. Who are they at school? Let me see. And I would want to know who this person is. I would want to talk to their parents, or I would want to know physically who they are, no matter what. Because what if it is a person at school, great. But what if that person starts doing stuff to my child? I need to know where to go to talk to these people and find, who they are. But majority of the time it was just, it's a person at school. And that was not true, because they're talking to so many different people that when you really start looking at it and you're being a parent, what we're supposed to be is parents, right? We're supposed to care. Instead of just throwing the phone at them and letting them just do whatever the hell they want, being a parent and actually digging into who are you talking to and who is this person? I've caught my kids talking to people that they weren't supposed to be talking to, ended up being predators right in my own home. Of course. Absolutely.
Really? You have?
Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, and now it never got to the point to where they were having a relationship with them or anything like that. But they were contacting my kids, because this is what people don't get. It's that prevalent. It's that prevalent. I would have judges when I would go to get a search warrant signed that would say, okay, can you show me this? And I'd say, absolutely, Judge, I can show it to you right now. And he would literally stop proceedings in the court and say, in my chambers, and make me go in there, put a computer on his desk, and he goes, show me. I'd pull up my profile and would literally within 5 minutes have a predator group starting to talk to me. And the judge's mind's completely blown. I mean, they're just going, oh my God, like, okay, all right, well, from now on, anything you bring to me, I want to know about it, because I'm going to help you catch these people. That's how bad it is. So if my kids, they're hitting my kids are hitting every child on planet Earth. There's not a selective, random thing about it. It's so prevalent that I promise you that any children out there, they have predators in their friends list that they don't even know are predators.
That is a chilling realization.
Yes. Terrifying, but it's true. 100% true.
Okay. So for parents that know absolutely nothing about the internet, they maybe have parental controls on a television that they don't really know how to use because the kids are better at using it anyway. They don't really know how to monitor what kids look at. What can they be doing?
The very first thing that they can do is with their phones. And that's I'm happy now that the restrictions on phones have come so far. You can go into into the account on your phone, and it'll have a place where you can control what your child views, what they can do. Can they download apps? Can they use their camera? Can they send images? Can they download explicit material? Can they look at explicit material? All of that. So the very first thing that I want them to do is there's probably thousands of YouTube videos that walk you through how to deal with the parental controls on your phone. And this is, and I like to approach this in a real world context, because again, when I would talk to parents, I would say, they're ready to take the phone and throw it in the lake after I finish the presentation. I'm like, okay, well, that's not real life, because you just can't. All kids are going to have a phone, right? So the real world approach is, as their age grows, and I've been through all this with both of my children. As they grow, then the restrictions, and as they become more responsible, and as they become older and they become more mature and they can handle more and more things, you can ease up certain restrictions as they get older, right? I mean, a 13-year-old should have no way you should let a 13-year-old have access to a camera in a bathroom, for example, and be able to talk to people be able to communicate and message people in other apps or games. I mean, I can tell you right now, one of the very first things a predator is going to have them do is go somewhere private and take a picture of them in decent. I mean, that's what they're going to do. So for that, using that example, in the app, in the parent restrictions on the phones, it will say, can they talk to other people? Like, can they message people outside of their contacts, outside of approved contacts? You can click that. No, just click the switch. Nope, they can't. So it'll block them from communicating with other people. Same thing with the camera. Same thing with sending images. All of those things are designed that way so that it can protect them from getting caught in that back and forth.
But can the parental controls, are they that good that they can stop somebody from contacting someone outside of their contacts? If, because presumably their contacts will be on Messenger, but if they then download WhatsApp, or they use Facebook Messenger, or they use Instagram Messenger, it can't control all of that. Surely they all have individual access controls.
Yeah, I'll answer that in a two-part answer. Number one, kids are smart and they will figure out a way around things. So are predators, right? So that's full disclosure. You're never safe. You're never 100% safe. That's number one.
Right.
Number two, though, the protections have gotten better. So like in Apple and in the iPhone, I know for sure, that's what my kids have. It has where you can't, they're not allowed to download apps. Download apps. I can flip a switch, but they can't download apps at all. So I can control exactly what apps they have on their phone. And I have the apps that I allow them to have, and it says always allow, right? So I can have apps in that group of apps that I let them have. And again, you can ask both of my kids. For years, they begged me to have Snapchat, and it was an absolute not. Nope. Not going to have an app where it deletes everything that goes on in the conversation. She said, we're not, that's not going to happen. Why would you want that in the first place? Well, all my friends are on it. That's not an excuse. All your friends, if you have a friend, they can message you other ways. They can use the text messaging on your phone. Oh, Dad, that's just so ridiculous. I mean, everybody's on Snap. I'm like, well, I don't parent everybody. I parent you. I protect you. I don't protect them. So it is a lot better where you can control what apps they download, if they're allowed to download any apps whatsoever, and so forth. So, but I agree with you. I would never be so presumptuous to say that, oh, that's all you got to do and you're safe. Not true. Not true. You'll figure out a way around it.
You mentioned Snapchat there. I know my daughter uses Snapchat. My daughter's adult. She's 20. But Snapchat is a frightening app because if you enable it, it's got GPS tracking and you can see the location of the person you're talking to. She was actually using it to check where her younger sister was at all times. And her sister didn't know that Kira could see where she was. Now, parents may not be aware of that if your child has Snapchat and they have the location tracker enabled, that people they're talking to won't only know who they are, they'll know where they are at any point. Yep. And that is a frightening realization.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I'll give you a story about a case that we had that dealt with that.
Is this going to upset me now? Is this going to upset? Probably. Okay.
Probably. Yeah. So prepare yourself. But no, we had a young girl that was talking to a predator. She thought she was having a relationship with a young boy. And she would, of course, she's young and she was in love and he was in love and so forth. And let's just I won't give any details of any actual cases, but let's just say his name was Billy. Okay. The boy's name she's having a relationship with name is Billy. And she was in school and, someone came, and again, now this is way back when. So this isn't like now we've had all of the different school shootings and things. So security at schools have gotten way better. Still not where I think it should be, but way better. And there had someone showed up at her school and said, I am the father, knew where she was. Okay. Number one, knew when her classes changed and when she would be alone or when there wouldn't be a teacher watching her, showed up at her school and went to her and said, I'm Billy's father. He's been in a tragic car accident and he's clinging to life and requesting you. I'm going to take you to him if that's okay. And the girl said, yeah, of course. If it weren't for a very due diligent school resource officer that saw them leaving and questioned what was going on, that girl would have been abducted. And it would have led to a far worse outcome. But turns out Billy didn't exist. The predator was the older man that was saying that he was Billy's father. But because he knew right where she was, he knew what time she was going to do whatever. He planned his plan was to facilitate that so that he could grab her, give her some fake story. And again, that story right there tells it tells you the mind of a predator, how devious they can be. You've got to think like that. You can't think, again, it's not going to be a guy in a trench coat standing on the corner exposing himself to everybody. I mean, that's not the way it works. They're intelligent, and they figure out ways. You've got to be very vigilant as a parent to not allow your child to be vulnerable.
Christ.
Yeah.
She'd have been taken right out of school where everyone would have presumed she was perfectly safe.
And she'd have gone missing, and no one would have known what happened. I mean, until they dug into all of this, the social media and her phone and all of that kind of thing, that she would have absolutely been abducted. There's no question. You can't trust anything. I mean, that's really what it boils down to.
You can't.
Well, okay. Now let's not just scare everybody and think of it this way now. What if that girl had been taught by her parents that if you're talking to somebody like this and someone shows up in your life and says they're XYZ, don't believe it? If you get your child in some kind of form of mental state that, have you seen catfish? That all kids have seen catfish, right? Have you seen this? This is the way these people operate. Don't believe anything you see. If anything like this happens, don't go with the person, right? If parents are having this open dialogue with their kids and saying, hey, I'm in this with you. I understand. We won't blame you. I'm not going to be upset, right? Tell me if somebody has talked you into sending graphic images. Look, I'm a person too. We were all teenagers at one time too. We did stupid stuff when we were 13, 14, 15, 16, and let your kids know that. You're not above sin. We've all done it. God knows what you and I would have done when we were 15 if we'd had cell phones. I mean, that's just the truth. So our kids need to know that we're people too, and they can talk to us, and never let them be in this situation, because we can't police them 24/7. We can't hold their hand 24/7, especially as they're growing up. But I'll tell you what, the more educated we can make them about these types of things, the better we can arm them to defend themselves and not allow this kind of thing to happen.
And where do you think it's going in terms of technology and cyberbullying, cybercrime, and predators using this?
Well, the scariest thing to me is AI, and the reason I say that it's not just a blanket statement about AI. I love AI, but what I'm meaning about AI is the images and videos and things it can create. So I would just imagine how, in the hands of a tech savvy predator, the videos and images he can make of people that don't exist. Again, if he's preying on a young girl, he could create, if he's tech savvy, AI is getting so good now, he could create a total profile with videos, with images, with anything he wanted to through AI that you would believe anyone would believe that's an actual 16-year-old boy, right? So that's what really scares me, because now I think kids more than ever could be totally manipulated and duped into believing that they're speaking to a real person. Back in the day, they would have to collect these images and things, they would really have to be super creative in creating this stuff. Now, once AI gets to a point, you can imagine, where we can just voice command and tell AI what we want it to create. Hey, create me a video of a boy at the local high school football game, sitting in the bleachers, talking to somebody. And AI goes, there's your video. Even if it's a 30-second clip, it's enough to make another 13-year-old girl believe that that's a boy that was at their high school game. You know what I mean? So those kinds of things are what scare me moving forward.
Yeah, and it's going to get to the point where they'll be able to do a live video call with somebody, but replace themselves with a 13-year-old kid, and you just not going to know.
Exactly. Which is one of the first things they ask for, by the way, when they're grooming your child. One of the first things they ask for, go live with me. Go live with me. Because they don't want, not only do they want all the live stuff, but they also want to prove that you're not an undercover agent working online. So that one of the first things they do is let's go live. So that's another huge point that parents need to understand, that keep your kids from having access to their phones. I'll give you an example. My children were never allowed to keep their phone in the room after a certain time of night. They charge their phone in my bedroom. Phone is in my bedroom. If you're going to come and get your phone and anytime in the middle of the night, you're going to have to wake me up, right? So it's just little things like that. They're not going to charge their phone by their bed, because how do I know at 3 a.m. they're not going to be talked into taking their phone into the bathroom? right?
I think that's a really good piece of advice. That actually, not just for predators, but for bullying as well. Because if you're getting persecuted by somebody, you don't want that to be going on 24/7. Whereas if the parents keep the phone overnight or lock it away in a drawer, lock it away in a cabinet,